Most entrepreneurs build structure because someone tells them to. Paddy Condon built structure because chaos almost destroyed him. In this episode of The Pattern Seeking Entrepreneur, I sit down with Paddy Condon, founder of FBC Remodel, a design to build residential remodeling company he scaled into a multi-million-dollar brand without ever swinging a hammer. In this conversation, you'll learn how a kid who couldn't read in third grade built an entire culture around a literal formula for joy, and why the most resistant, chaos-wired people sometimes need the most structure, not the least. I'm Jonathan Domsky. This is The Pattern Seeking Entrepreneur. Let's go. Some entrepreneurs succeed by following the playbook, and some succeed by writing their own. This show is for the second kind. Welcome to The Pattern Seeking Entrepreneur, conversations with intense, analytical founders who have built something significant and are now redesigning the architecture of how they lead, build, and operate so that their strengths create leverage instead of friction. I'm your host, Jonathan Domsky, business and life coach, entrepreneur, and someone who has spent a career helping powerful minds build businesses that actually fit how they think. Let's get started. Paddy, let's hear your story. When did you first realize that you think differently than most people in the room?
Oh my God, it's been my entire life, honestly. I don't know that I ever thought that, how you just said it.
Yeah.
You know, I think that never actually occurred to me. But when I look back, what I see is all sorts of times when I would be with a group of people and just be like, God, this is so boring. I want to do something else. And so I'd rally the group and then we would go and do something fun, right? Or just, in business, I just have always thought about how to do things better, how like things drive me crazy and I want to just be in action and do something to make it better.
Yeah.
I feel like that is the biggest that I'm 55 years old, and what I've realized is my wiring is such that I have to be moving and I have to be creating change and I have to be in action.
Yeah.
And it actually drives some people crazy.
So that's a very common experience that everyone around you from the earliest age, they knew that you thought differently than other people in the room. When did you first think, oh, I'm the outlier?
Dude, it has been recent in my recent history.
Really? A whole life?
Totally.
Yeah.
I've gone through my entire life thinking just, that it ain't me, it's just everybody else.
What a bunch of weirdos. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But now I look at it and I realize like, no, actually the rest of the world is wired way differently than I am. And I am something of an anomaly.
Yeah. Well, it's the source of so much of your power and leveraged into what you've accomplished, and also so much of the friction. Paddy, tell me about your genius. What are things that you seemingly effortlessly do better than almost anyone you know?
I have amazing days, like every day.
Tell me
Like
about
every
that.
day. Oh my God, every day is just a magical miracle. And I'm just like, I just wake up ready for life. I mean, that is, I think, like the thing that more than anything, I just have this view of life as being this incredible opportunity. And there's like this. I can't remember who I was listening to. It was actually Michael Singer talking about and one of the old people, Confucius or somebody who had this belief that like there's always a knife above your head waiting to fall. It could fall at any moment, and so why wouldn't you just make the most of every single moment?
Is that something that you were born with? Was it inculcated into you as a small child, or is that something that you learned as an adult?
No, I mean, certainly some of it is just my genetic makeup, right? But I mean, I put a lot of energy into making sure that I stay positive.
Yeah.
I mean, man, I listen to I don't know, on average, 45 minutes to an hour of like just good material. And when I say
Yeah.
good material, it's not, CNBC, it's not the news, it's not Fox, it's not like it's gotta be like, material that because you have all of these things coming at you.
Yeah.
And it's really easy to go down a rabbit hole.
Well, what we
But
focus on,
you
yeah,
know,
what we focus on tends to expand. And if you
yeah,
fill your head with garbage and bad news and all the drama that's swirling around you, of all of us at any time, then that's your life. And if you
yeah.
focus on, like, wow, like this amazing combination of wind and sun and cloud, this has never existed before. Isn't that incredible? And I get to experience it. What a gift. Then that's what you get to experience every day. And you exemplify that more than just about anyone I know. So it's a beautiful
No.
thing.
No, I mean you could walk out any moment has that opportunity.
Yeah.
Any moment has that opportunity to have that level of gratitude and have that level of, of just awareness, of appreciation, of being present.
Yeah. And you are not born with the silver spoon in your mouth. You're no stranger to loss and grief and tragedy and trials. How do you keep that attitude, or how do you recover that attitude when you're knocked off balance?
So in our lives, we've had the honor of meeting Brother David, right? And
Mm,
Brother David, for anybody that doesn't know him, he is this tiny little human being, right? He's a Benedictine monk, and he's devoted his life to the practice of gratitude. And Jonathan, man, Brother David changed my life.
mm.
He fundamentally changed my perspective. When he told us that everything that life gives us is what? Do you
It's a
remember?
gift. It's a
It's a
gift.
gift.
Yeah.
It's a gift. And so like in those moments you know, when something happens, circumstances that you don't want, something happens, and you're like, wow, this sucks. But you can flip it in a nanosecond by
Yeah.
asking the question of, well, what's the gift here?
Yeah. And the only appropriate
What's the gift?
response, and the only response to a gift is gratitude. So
Gratitude.
it's a beautiful way to live your life. You don't
Yeah.
always know what the gift is right now, but when you look back, it's always these things that we most resist are planting the seeds of the things we most value in the future. Patty, tell me about your business. What do you do? Who do you serve? What are the problems you solve?
Yeah. Yeah. So I've got a design build residential remodel business. And so we're here in Denver, Colorado. We're in Chicago, and we solve the problem of how do you create a really create a space, create your home to be everything that you want it to be. And we do that in a way, mostly, frankly, through systems and processes. It's like you've got to. There's so much that goes into remodel work that having all of the details and having everything really thought out well is the key to it, and we're really good at that. And so the problem that we solve is something that people don't even really know they need, which is a joyful remodel process.
So this is one of the things I find so interesting about you, Patty. You're very right-brained, you're a creative person, and everything being around you is like, let's try something new. Let's try something, let's be spontaneous. I don't care what the plan is. Let's just do this. That sounds fun. And then you went and you built a company around a formula. How do you explain that? Most right-brained people don't reach for equations.
Yeah, so the equation that you're talking about is our joy formula, and it's literally a formula that we use. It's joy equals success plus well-being to the power of purpose. And we use it as a cultural tool to ensure that everybody that is interacting with us is having a joyful experience. Now, why a formula? So I think the way that I'm wired is wired towards chaos, wired towards no systems, wired
Yeah.
towards, that's my general wiring, is that I'm going to very much resist being put into a box. Yet there is only freedom within commitment.
Hmm.
And what I've realized is like when you commit to a process, when you commit to, that's why I have like my life. If you were to look at my life, you would think I'm an engineer with all of the structure and the things that I do on a daily basis. But it's because I realize like the only way that I'm going to have this incredible like outlook and positivity and joy of life is if I keep the structures in place that maintain that level of energy,
Talk to me more about finding those structures, because it's not just about having structure. Like with the sort of spontaneous, energetic, divergent mind that you have, it's so common for people to resist structure, but the most successful people I know are able to maintain that spark, maintain that freedom and spontaneity while creating a structure that works for them. And you and I both have children who are tornadoes of
yeah
energy
yeah
and divergence, who resist every kind of structure that you could possibly give them. And yet you were that kid too, but you found the structure that works for you. What was the process of finding the structure that actually works for the way that you think, as opposed to feeling like a prison?
well, I think first of all, I mean, if you look at the pain and the suffering that I went through when I didn't have the structure, is that, like I personally, I couldn't look at people that had a ton of structure and say, oh, that's what I wanted to do, because I
Yeah.
resisted it so much. But and when life is just constantly giving you blow after blow after blow of of bad results that you don't want to have in your life, and you realize like, wow, I have got to fix this.
Yeah.
That's like, how it occurred to me. And so I slowly, very reluctantly started to embrace these
Mm.
structures. But then what happened is like, as soon as I put one structure in place, I'm like, wow, that really works.
So,
And
so
so
that,
then it now I'm like, structure, profit. I'm like, oh my God, structure,
yeah.
everything is within structure.
So it wasn't just about finding the right structure to fit the way you think. It was having enough pain that you're like, this is stupid. I can't keep doing this. I need to
Yeah.
have some
Yeah.
systems, no matter how much I don't want to.
Yep.
Interesting. Along those same lines, you're in the remodeling industry, and almost every contractor builder I know, they're great with their hands, they're masters of their craft, and they struggle with the business side. And you flip that. Like you're not a tradesperson. And at the same time you built this incredibly successful and recognized remodeling brand. What gave you the confidence to walk into that world?
Oh my God, I should not have had the confidence to walk into that world. Honestly, I was just cocky and I didn't know what I didn't know. And I saw that the remodel industry in general was had so much opportunity,
Yeah.
so much opportunity to, just for scale, for it's a big industry. I mean, there's so much
Yeah.
opportunity. And but no, I still can't frame a wall to save my life. I mean, that's not,
Yeah.
that's not one of my abilities.
I just want to call that out to anyone who's listening who is considering starting a business but thinks, oh, I'm not ready yet. No entrepreneur that I know would be hired to do the thing that they started their business on. All of us were unqualified, and the job description of the entrepreneur is to figure it out, not to know the answer. And
Well, and there's great benefit of being able to come in without, 30 years or whatever of
yeah,
industry experience.
yeah,
Now, there's a real downside to that, obviously, but the benefit is that you look at everything with a fresh set of eyes, and you ask questions about, you ask maybe even stupid questions, but sometimes those stupid questions are the ones that like uncover something that's
yeah,
unlocking, you know?
yeah. Patty, you talked about resisting structure until it just hurt too much, and you're like, I need to find a better way. And I'm curious, you've talked publicly on your Build Joy podcast about your father having big dreams that got drowned out by a tragic
Yeah.
lifestyle. How much of what you've built do you think is a response to watching that happen and not
Yeah.
wanting that to happen to you?
I think a lot of it is, I mean, I do believe that you're either oftentimes you're running from something,
Yeah.
that gives you the drive. And, and my dad was this amazing human being. He was, so smart, but man, he couldn't, I mean, his work hours were like, 1 o'clock in the afternoon until 4 o'clock. So he had like 3 hours to get anything done because he
Yeah.
would sleep in super late because he was hungover. And
Yeah.
then he'd have to start drinking by 4. And so, you don't get a
Mm.
whole lot of life accomplished in that amount of time.
Yeah.
Um, and so, I think that, that his alcohol consumption was just a way to numb the pain of, like, oh my God, I've got these big dreams, but I'm afraid
Mm.
to pursue them. And
Yeah.
so when I drink, it numbs it, and I can fantasize that someday I'm going to do it.
You said running to something or running from something. You talked about fear. You know, you've talked about this journey from fear-based leadership to love-based leadership. That's another way of saying running to something or running from something. What were you actually afraid of?
Hmm.
What were you running from? And at your best, what are you running to?
Yeah, I could tell you exactly what I was running from. In third grade, I was the kid in the back of the class who couldn't read. And so, I've got a Dick and Jane book out while everyone else is reading chapter books.
Yeah.
And it frustrated me to no end.
Yeah.
And I was the kid who was always at the principal's. I was always getting in fights. I was
Yeah.
always, and the reason was because I felt like an idiot. And
Yeah.
I just had all this anger kind of pent up, inside of me. And so I know for certain, like, so much of what I was running from was I didn't want to be that kid. I didn't
Yeah.
want to be my dad. And I was going to prove to everybody that, I was worthwhile, that I was smart, that all this kind of stuff. So that's what I feel like I was running from.
Yeah.
You know?
Was there anyone in your life growing up who looked at that same kid who couldn't read in third grade and said, Patty, you're special. You have a
Oh,
spark in you.
100%. God
Yeah.
bless. Thank God, right?
Who helped you see your genius when maybe your teachers didn't?
I had a basketball coach that he was just so positive, and he he uh, he always believed he always believed in me, and just even hearing the words, and we need to remember this for our kids and young kids. It's like hearing the words of, like, man, you're really gonna be successful. You're really gonna do something. Because you don't feel like, as a kid, you don't feel successful. You don't feel like
No.
but and so it wouldn't have even worked if he would have said, hey, Patty, you're a really great kid. I'm like, I don't believe you.
Yeah.
But just putting out the notion
I
that, hey,
believe in you. Yeah.
someday, man, you're really going to have this figured out. There's
Yeah.
bigger stuff out there for you, and you're really gonna, be able to take advantage of it.
Yeah. So as an adult, someone who's done a lot of work on themselves, someone who's trained themselves to just focus on the good, what did fear look like inside your company at its worst?
It was me trying to control everything. It was me driving and pushing. You know, if you weren't listening, I'd just talk louder, right?
Yeah. Who in your
Um,
who in your company is
yeah,
allowed to tell you that you're wrong?
everybody. Oh my God. Yeah, and
What about it?
in reality, like, it's, my leadership team will. It's really hard, for people that don't know me as well. I was just contemplating this the other day, like, making sure I've got the relatedness with everybody, that anybody wouldn't
Yeah.
have trouble with that. But sometimes I think there is just this hierarchy that you don't want,
Yeah.
but sometimes it just exists. And so I feel like I'm constantly always working on that with just going out to lunches and sitting down with people, and really not even talking about work, just trying to build relationships so
Yeah.
that they would feel comfortable telling me that I was wrong about something.
What does leading with love look like at its best in your business?
I for sure it's it's caring so much about that person who's sitting in front of you that you ask questions
Yeah.
and you listen because you just care so much, and like fear is when I'm coming from a place of fear, it's always like something's wrong, so I'm going to push an agenda. When I'm coming
Yeah.
from a space of love, it's really, how do I get to know you better? How do I
Yeah.
help? How can I be of service to you? And if you do that enough, sometimes you can come in and you can say, hey, I'm seeing this.
Yeah.
Are you open for some feedback on this? But really, that can only be such a small part of the conversations. Most of it really needs to be about the humanity, about
Yeah.
connecting with that person and really caring about them. And most of the time, right? Then once you know what really matters to them, well, then you can actually be helpful.
Yeah. Patty, what do you think has your brain made possible in your business that you just don't think a more conventional thinker would have pulled off?
There's uh Jonathan, every single thing that I look at, every time that I'm in a meeting, I I just I hear things and I see things that other people aren't seeing. And that probably the biggest difference, like fear to love. Now I just don't say anything. Now
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
do, but I
Yeah.
hold back. I wait a second, and then I'm like, okay, what questions could I ask that could maybe let this percolate from within the team instead of me,
Yeah.
saying like, hey, don't you guys see it this way?
So much of the harm that we do can be mitigated by just not doing anything. It's
Yeah.
not learning how to be a better leader. It's just learning how not to be a worse leader. That's half the battle right there.
That's really profound, Jonathan. You're right, because it it really is like, if we could just take a moment and let that pass, and especially when we have some energy around it,
Yeah.
to let it pass and come back to it, you
Yeah.
know, just come back to it with questions and curiosity, and hey, when you said that, I just was curious, what were you thinking?
Hey, where's that same brain that gives you your edge also gotten in your own way?
I think it's exactly what we were just talking about. It's when I hear something and immediately react to it. That is a recipe for disaster, you know, most of the time. I mean, sometimes, like, there are some instances that the boundaries are so clear that it needs an immediate, and people need that immediate reaction so
Yeah.
that they know, like, hey, this is something that we don't do this.
Yeah.
Uh, but overall, I really think that where the danger lies is when we're reacting out of emotion, because that's always coming from a place of I don't know how better to articulate it, but it's just a place of fear. It's a place of
Yeah.
not being enough. It's a place of hurt. It's a place of,
Yeah. Every morning before I open my eyes, I meditate. And one of the affirmations that I say is I lead with love, compassion, and acceptance, not with hurt or anger or fear. Just exactly what you just
Mm.
said. And it's all the difference. And what we focus on, it tends to expand. And if you just orient yourself towards love, compassion, and acceptance, that's how you show up. And if you orient yourself towards hurt or anger or fear, that's how you show up. And our organizations reflect that. Patty, where are you in flow as a business owner?
I'll tell you a story actually about
Yeah.
flow and not being in flow. So we had opened up an office in Minneapolis 15 years ago, and for 15 years I have not been in flow in that office, like with the
Mm,
original person that went up, the leader that went up and started that office, and the conflict was just so obvious that at a certain point I had to let him go, but I wasn't there as a leader, and we didn't have a leader for that office. It was a pretty good size office doing 10 million a year. And I couldn't bring myself to admit that I was just, the whole situation was out of flow,
Mm.
and that it needed a complete reboot in order to fix the issue. We
Mm.
had moments of profitable years and it doing well, but it was only with really intense outside intervention. My leader from Chicago flying in every week and that type of thing. We just didn't have the local leader that could develop more leaders. There was nobody there really steering that ship, setting the cultural tones and everything, right?
Yeah.
And so every time I'd go up there, Jonathan, I'd get just a sick feeling in my stomach. I'd be like, oh, I don't want to
Mm.
go here. But I'd go up and I'd do my best, bring good energy. I'd get some response and then leave. But it wasn't enough to really get that culture thriving.
Yeah.
And then just recently, this I don't know, 3 months ago, some circumstances came up where it became really clear that we needed to shut down the office. And in an instant, I made that decision in less than 5 days to shut down a good chunk of our business. But I shut it down because I knew for certain, like
So
the energy flow was
yeah,
just was it wasn't there.
I want to hear more about this. So for 15 years, you were not listening to your gut that felt it every time that you would fly out there. What changed that made you think, it's time for me to start listening and being in alignment with who I am and to, make that hard choice? And why now? Why not 10 years from now? Why not 10 years ago?
It's I think there's just been some changes within me, Jonathan, where I believe. I'd say I'm a believer. Do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah, I do.
And I
You-
wasn't a believer before.
Yeah. Oh,
And when I say
go ahead.
believer, like, I mean, that's gonna, like, trigger some people, like, oh, a believer, like, but what it is like, I just believe. I believe that there is energy and that there is a flow, and that when you are rowing against the river,
Yeah.
man, it's hard work.
It's hard
But
to
when
swim
you
upstream.
Yep. But when you go with the river, when you go with the flow, when you really anything in your life, I firmly believe that you can look at any issue in your life that you're fundamentally just struggling with and just turn the boat around and go with the energy, go with the flow.
Talk about being a believer. Life is not supposed to be hard.
Right.
A life of full engagement, a high degree of intense activity, yes, absolutely. But when you're in full alignment with who you are as a human being, even if you're expending a lot of energy, it feels effortless. It feels meaningful. It feels joyous. And when you're fighting against yourself, that's when work feels like a slog. And that's what you experienced. And I'm delighted that you put an end to that. Which brings me to my next question. You and I have known each other, Patty, for 25 years. And we've learned from countless gurus teaching their playbook for success. Where have you given yourself permission to just do it differently than the way we were taught? And what changed when you did?
I'm going to put a different spin on it,
Yeah.
because I think what was happening was that I didn't do it differently. I actually let my ego just give in
Mm.
and recognize that this wisdom that we receive from our elders is freaking spot on. I don't need to reinvent, you know, energy and flow. And like, people have been talking about this, and I've been exposed to this for my entire life. But for some reason I fight it. And for some reason I feel like I need to be unique, and I need to be,
Mm.
create my own thinking. And in
Yeah.
reality, and I go back to Brother David quite often, because he just, when I met Brother David, I felt like we were all in competition, you know?
Yeah.
Like everything boiled down to some sort of a competition. And shortly after, through that experience and some other experiences, what I realized is, no, we're all just, it's all about being in community and
Yeah.
helping each other out. And I've been hearing that from people for years.
Yeah.
But my ego and you know, my need to be so unique and different uh, really created a lot of pain and suffering for myself. But like
Yeah.
ultimately, like I think it was actually me being okay with, you know, being able to sit down with somebody like you, Jonathan, and be, able to embrace you and love you and get something from you and be able to say, man, my ego is just fine. I'm going to take a little bit of Jonathan, put it in my life and move that and take that forward, you know? And for me, it's you're just, you're always growing, you're always learning and just seeing your evolution, is such an inspiration to me.
Thank you,
So,
Patty. It's a wonderful compliment. I want to draw out something that you said. I think it's really important. So much of what I talk about in this show and a lot of what I teach is about not receiving the received wisdom to adapt it to the way that you think. But you said something opposite to that and equally profound, which is so much of the time, like there's a reason why the received wisdom is the received wisdom. Like people have been talking about how to live a good life for 5,000 years. Maybe they figured something out. And for your ego to say, well, yeah, I did hear this from this great teacher, but I think I could find a better way. You probably can't. Like, there's a reason why our teachers are our teachers. And to be able to put your ego aside and say, even if it doesn't make sense to me, I'm just going to try it and see what happens. There's a lot of wisdom in that. Thank you for that
yeah,
correction and that.
no, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, of course, there's all sorts of like, teachings that come at us all the time from society that like, oh my God, no, no, don't, you know, just around materialism and around like, what's important, what isn't important. We get,
Yeah,
bombarded with that. But no, the true wisdom, that we receive from our elders is just amazing. So yeah,
yeah, yeah. I
so
try not to read books that have been written in the last 10 years. I figure if people are still talking about them 10 years from now, then I'll read it. Because so much of it's just ego and fashion and
yeah,
noise. So, Patty, you're in transition right now. You're no longer CEO of your company. Is that correct?
correct.
You're founder and visionary. What happened and what did it take to let go?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you've got to water, you got to water the plants. And so I've put a lot of time and a lot of energy into my team. And the other thing I think is really important too is like I didn't have an agenda to be in this spot.
Yeah,
Like in any moment, like if I need to jump back in and help out, I'm willing to do so. So for me, that's important. Uh,
yeah,
I think for the team, it's important that they know that,
yeah,
right? That I'm willing to, but they don't want me to because they want it to be theirs, and I love that.
yeah,
And so we've gotten to a point where I just have a tremendous amount of trust in my leadership team, and especially now that we're shutting down the Minneapolis office where there wasn't, we just didn't have that leader and we didn't have that trust. But now with the
yeah.
two offices, we've got the right people, and it really is for a real row your boat. Yeah,
So you're in transition right now. You're figuring out what's next. Is there something that drains your energy that you wish you could give up this new year?
growing,
Say again?
scrolling on my
Scrolling.
phone,
Yeah, social
scrolling.
media. Yeah,
Listen, like I'm pretty clear I have an addictive personality, and it's very easy for me to just start to scroll on the phone, and
yeah,
I can just waste 15, 20 minutes without even a blinking my eye. So that's negative energy. And it's been a challenge for me to completely, cut that out. Isn't that stupid?
yeah. It's funny. So my 17-year-old son, when he was small, like we really restricted his screen time. But when he got into high school and he started actually being interested in stuff, and I took away all the controls because I just knew that he doesn't need them anymore.
Yeah.
But sometimes he'll be in a season where he just really needs to focus on something, and he'll ask me to put the controls back on because
Oh,
he knows
interesting.
that because he knows he can't trust himself to do it. I wonder if he should put parental controls on your phone that like Facebook or whatever it is just turns off after half an
Jonathan, I'm gonna give you access to my phone,
hour.
and
Yeah.
you can be my parental control master.
Yeah.
No, it's just, I mean, it's just stuff like that, right? Like it's anything, anything that I'm doing that's gonna try to like take me away from being present. That to me is the biggest danger. Um,
That's one more aspect of that structure that you talked about that sets you free.
yeah,
Patty, what's a compliment you love to receive?
interesting. 100%. It's when somebody has put into action something that I've had an impact on.
Yeah.
So it's not even necessarily a direct compliment, but as a coach, which I do, I coach a lot of people, and not just in my business, but just, mentoring folks, and to see somebody put into action something that came from our conversation is the biggest compliment I could have.
Yeah.
And certainly I get that a lot with my kids. I see them putting into action certain
Yeah.
elements, but really anybody. Because I'm making a difference in people's lives, and that's
Yeah.
just beautiful.
I like to say I've been the recipient of that from you, Patty, many times, and you've made a profound impact on my life, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you, bud.
One of my favorite things to hear from people is their vision for the future. And we're having this conversation on June 17th, 2026. Patty, if we were to talk again exactly 1 year from now, it's June 17th, 2027, and you've just crushed it in every aspect of this transition in your business, with your family, with your health, with your friends, with your spirituality, with fun. Looking back, what's made this such a spectacular year?
I will tell you, there's a practice going back to structure, right?
Yeah.
I have this practice of, it's called the perfect day, another perfect day.
Yeah.
And at the beginning of the day, I set an intention for the day. So three
Yeah.
things that I want to accomplish, three things that maybe one of them is a way of being, one of them, whatever. But
Yeah.
I set the intention for the day, right?
Yeah.
Then at the end of the day, I look back and acknowledge if I did those three, four items.
Yeah.
But I just journal what made today a perfect day.
Yeah.
And so a year from now, it will have been to have 365 perfect days.
Yeah.
And that is, I've become way less interested in setting big goals of, oh, I want the business to be doing this. I still do that kind of stuff, but
Yeah.
I don't get hung up on it. And really, Jonathan, I want to have a life of perfect days.
Yeah. Let me read you back what I heard. It's June 17th, 2027, and I declare the possibility that my every day is a perfect day. I'm stretching and growing and being fully present just the way I am and just the way I'm becoming. What do you think?
I love that. I love that.
Is there
And you
anything,
captured that pretty well there, Jonathan.
is there anything in the way? Anything that's stopping you from getting what you want, from being what you want?
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes I don't follow that structure.
Hmm.
Sometimes I'll miss a morning of setting an intention. And so it really is as simple as like
Does it
believing
knock your
in
day
the,
off course when you don't do that?
yeah, it really does. And, you know, and so, no, it really is as simple as, we have a choice every day of how we're going to live our lives. And so just as an example with the Minneapolis office, like that's a traumatic thing. There's financial, ramifications. We had to let, a whole team of people go. None of that's fun. And none of it was their fault. We simply did not have the right leadership in that office. And I will tell you, I've had perfect days every day going through all of that and going through that whole process. Every day has been a perfect day. And I wouldn't change
Yeah.
it at all. It's, and it's just entirely because of the choice that I'm making around like how, what do these events mean? Well,
Yeah.
they're a gift. It's a gift, and what's coming from it.
Yeah.
So
That
yeah,
shift from I have to I get to,
yeah,
I get to shut down this office with humanity and grace.
yep.
Yeah. Let's switch roles for a second. You be the question asker, I'll be the question answer.
Yeah.
What do you want to ask me?
So, Jonathan, I have seen in your life a tremendous transformation. And I have a buddy of mine that always says, you know, it's you got to be sick and tired of being sick and tired
Yeah.
before you're really ready for change. What were you sick and tired of being sick and tired about that really drove this change in your life?
So I'm going to flip that on you a little bit. I want to give it some context, but I want to flip that on you a little bit. There's two kinds of visions for the future. There's a victim's vision. I just want it to stop sucking so badly. Like, what are you tired of being sick and
Yeah.
tired of? And I certainly had my share of things that I was sick and tired of. I was literally sick and tired. I had a brain tumor that just wrecked my whole endocrine system and dramatically decreased my energy that I dealt with for well over a decade. I was in a marriage that at one time was magical and then was, really, really hard. I had a business that was super successful and then it struggled. Like I had all these things that I was dealing with, but I don't think it was any of those things that I would look at and say like, ah, like this, I gotta change this. The victim's vision, when there's a gap between where we are and where we want to go, there's this creative tension. And the victim's vision, that tension's like a rubber band. You take the actions to reduce the pain, and then there's no tension anymore, and it's just that yo-yo. Like, I don't have to do those things anymore. In contrast, when you have a positive vision for the future of what you actually want, there's that same creative tension, but it's like a magnet and it just pulls you towards it. And I remember about 5 years ago, Patty, you and I were standing together with a friend of ours, Kenny Edison, and you were trying to convince Kenny that like when you see a rock in your subconscious, you just have to turn it over, see what's under it. And Kenny was like, "No, I'm
Nope.
good.
Yep.
I don't need to look at under that rock." But I'm a personal growth athlete. Just everything that I look at, if it's not that perfect day, I just want to look at it and say, like, who is it that I need to be? What is it I need to learn? What's the action that I need to take? How could I stretch myself? How could I grow? And the directions where I wanted to grow were, how could I remove all the clutter that's inside me that's impeding my flow of joy? How can I transcend my challenge in connecting with people and connect as deeply as possible and find a way to do that with as many people as I can and to just keep trying stuff? What is it I need to learn? Who is it I need to be? What's the action I need to take until, the flywheel starts moving and it just gets better and better and better? With all the challenges that I had during the first, decade or two that you and I knew each other, like it took me that long to figure out how to remove the rocks inside of me that were preventing that flow of joy. Whereas now, I remember about 5 years ago, you and I had met we were in person for the first time in a year. And I had just come back from an 8-day spiritual retreat where I just learned to open my heart. And after about 5 minutes, you said, "Hi, my name's Paddy Condon. I don't think we've ever met before." Just I've always wanted to stretch, I've always wanted to grow, I've always wanted to learn. And I just, whether there's any indication that I'm having success or not, I just have this drive to figure it out and to keep going. And the biggest transformation that I've had in my life is just learning how to be joyful and learning how to connect with people. And I just kept trying stuff until I found a way that works. Patty, what do you wish people listening today knew about you or your company?
I think it's this. I was having a conversation with a buddy of mine who's, I think, clinically depressed. And like I have certainly had my bouts of going deep down into the muck and the mire of depression. And he's not doing any of the he doesn't have any of the practices
Yeah,
to stay healthy, to
the
stay
structures. Yeah.
emotionally and physically healthy. And I think the thing that I would want people to know is I spend at least an hour to 2 hours a day to my energy, my to be in flow, to stay in the space of abundance and
Yeah.
love and power. It it's it's a practice,
Yeah.
and we have to practice it. And it's not, it's not something that you're just born with. It comes with practice.
Finding and embracing that structure that you've been
Yeah,
searching for your whole life. Paddy,
yeah.
how should people get in touch with you, learn more, follow your work?
FBC Remodel is the .com is the you can also go to buildjoy.com, our URLs. And otherwise, yeah, just find me through Jonathan.
Paddy Condon, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your heart, your story. I so enjoyed it. And I just want to end with the Condon family motto. If we could do it together. This has been fun, fun, fun.
Fun, fun, fun. That's right. Absolutely.
Thanks for listening to The Pattern Seeking Entrepreneur. If today's conversation resonated, especially if you are a founder who has built something meaningful but senses that the structure around you no longer fully fits how your mind works, I would love to hear from you at untangled-coaching.com. Don't forget the dash. If this episode was valuable, the best thing you could do is to share it with one founder who needs to hear this message. That's how the show grows, one person at a time. Until next time, may your work ahead fit you better than anything you've ever built before. And if today's conversation felt like it was speaking directly to you, probably was. I'd love for you to reach out.